are ready to begin the special meeting. I'd like to call to order a special meeting for July 19th for the Bloomfield Hill Board of Education. Take attendance.
All board members are present.
If we can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll just move a little slow. Moving on to agenda item 2, introductory comments. For community viewing and feedback opportunities, all meetings, interviews are open to the public and are being live streamed, cable casted, and recorded for later viewing. Recordings and information on the superintendent search is available on the Board of Education's website. Those present at the interview and watching remotely may provide feedback to the Board of Education in its consideration at www.bloomfield.org/feedback. Today we have joining us our superintendent candidate, Dr. Roy Bishop, Deputy Superintendent of Educational Services, Grosse Pointe Public School Systems, Grosse Pointe Woods, Michigan. Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Education, I would like to welcome Dr. Roy Bishop to this interview for the position of superintendent. Dr. Bishop is currently the Deputy Superintendent of Educational Services for Grosse Pointe Public School Systems in Grosse Pointe Woods, Michigan. I'd like to take a few moments to briefly describe our format. The interview will take 90 minutes. There will be 21 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, time permitting, we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of the Board of Education, make closing remarks. We'll also let you know if time is becoming an issue and if there is a need for you to pick up the pace on your responses. For those viewing the interview, we welcome your feedback. Whether present in the audience or watching live stream on video, you may use our QR code provided for this purpose. Although the task of choosing our next superintendent is the responsibility of the Board of Education as elected representatives of our community, we value and seriously consider the input of our stakeholders in this process. We'll begin, and I'll start off with the opening questions. Dr. Bishop, while we have the opportunity to review your application materials, audience members have not. Please briefly review your background and share what caused you to be interested in this position at this point in your career.
First off, thank you so much for having me here today. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with each and every one of you about my passions, and education is definitely one of my passions. I am born from Saginaw, Michigan, and I don't know if you know anything about Saginaw, Michigan at all, but I come from very humble beginnings. And I graduated from Bridgeport High School. And I think it was my 11th grade year, I had a teacher by the name of Mr. Resler. And Mr. Resler, he was my 11th grade social studies teacher. And I remember walking down the hallway, and I caught eyes with him, and I was a little bit late to his class. I had my basketball in my hand, and he stopped me and said, Roy, and he knew I loved basketball. He knew I wanted to go to the NBA. That was my opportunity to get out of Saginaw and be successful. He said, you can be so much more than a basketball player. Your potential is sky high. When he told me that, it really fueled me. When I graduated Bridgeport High School, I didn't really know what I wanted to go to college for. But my dad, he spoke to me, and he spoke into my heart, and he said, what do you want to do, son? I said, you know what, Dad? I think I'm content on being exactly like you and being an accountant. He said, no, you don't want to be an accountant. You need to do something in which you can make a difference. What about education? So I went to Eastern Michigan University, and that's exactly what I did. I fell in love with teaching. I graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a degree in elementary education. It was also there where I met my beautiful wife. Her name was Latoya Reynolds at the time. Her name is now Latoya Bishop. We met in Spanish class, so the only Spanish I know is hola. I was a little distracted. But during that time when I was at Eastern Michigan University, I'm sorry, we have 3 children. We have 3 children. We have London, Layton, and Roy Bishop III. After graduating from Eastern Michigan University, I went on to be employed by the Birmingham Public School System. I was a teacher at a school called Birmingham Covington School, which was oftenly known as BCS. It's actually right down the road, and we actually did a lot of our training here, so this is actually bringing back a lot of memories here from the Doyle Center. It was there, and the schools there, BCS is a school that resembles the schools in which you have built within your school system. There are schools that inspire curiosity. There are schools that encourage students to take ownership over their learning, and for students to take agency in what exactly they want to be able to learn. After I left Birmingham Covington School, I went on to be a district-wide curriculum facilitator, K-12, working to support teachers incorporating technology into their classrooms. Then I was promoted to being an assistant principal and an athletic director. After my time in Birmingham, I was promoted to a principal in Grosse Pointe, and I went to Mason Elementary School. I was a principal there for 5 years, and it was there where I went through the reconfiguration process, and I had the opportunity to merge 2 buildings into one. And it really showed me what it means to create a shared mission and vision when you have 2 entities that are combining, that have different missions and visions, and what you have to do to bring people in, have the right conversations, and make sure you create something that benefits the needs of all students that are involved. I was promoted from that role to the role I'm in now, and I'm going to my 3rd year as being the Deputy Superintendent for Educational Services. What I've learned throughout my educational career, I've accepted challenging positions, and I will continue to accept them. But I firmly believe leadership matters, especially in this day and age. We have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep students first in all the decisions that we make. I have the capacity to help lead this organization and to be the lead learner. My experiences in building relationships, being an effective communicator, building teams, and not even just serving, leading in like districts allow me to come in to be able to enhance the overall environment here at Bloomfield Hill Schools and keep our student achievement extremely high. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you. What are your immediate challenges that you would expect to face as our superintendent? Given these, tell us how you would hit the ground rolling on your first day and be ready to address these challenges.
Well, one challenge for me is usually time, so I appreciate you letting me know that I only have 90 minutes today with you because I'm my only child, so I'm just going to put that out there right now. But I definitely will stick within my time constraints. When I think about the challenges, the immediate challenges that we're gonna partake in together, it's going to be reconfiguration. I'm going to go through all 3 first, and then I will address them individually. It's going to be reconfiguration. It's going to be building a family of 8. And it's also going to be strategic planning. When I think about reconfiguration, and I've gone through reconfiguration myself as a building principal and also as an educational leader in central office, so much is about the decision to reconfigure schools, but then there are so many other things you have to work through to make sure not only are your students are successful, but also your teachers and also the community is able to heal from that experience. I remember having to call a teacher and say, unfortunately, you're going to be at this building next because of this situation. And that bred a lot of fear within her. And I can only imagine, I actually can imagine. I had a chance to look at the 8th grade ceremonies that were online this year. And you could see the emotion from the principals and from the students and from the teachers who were actually moving to different schools. So I know reconfiguration is going to be one of those immediate challenges for us to counteract. To be able to do that, we're going to have to be relationship focused. We're going to have to be visible. We're going to have to listen to our community, create actions that allow us to value their voice, and do whatever we can so that they are set up for success in their new settings. The next item that I talked about was building a family of 8. If I'm honored to be the next superintendent, we're going to have to be a family. And when I say family, I often use team, but family, sometimes they agree, sometimes they disagree, but we are here for a common goal. We are here to make sure our mission and vision as a school district is lived out, and we are supporting every person that is in the fabric of our community. Even if they don't have students here, it's our job to be able to support them and our job to be able to let them know exactly what we do well as a school system. So for me, when I'm thinking about building a family of 8, a team of 8, I'm going to get to know each and every one of you on an individualized basis. Trustee Hill, I don't know if you like coffee or not. Maybe you do. But I'm going to ask if you would like to have coffee. That way we can have a one-on-one conversation. I'm going to do that with every trustee. And the reason for that is I want to ask you some very specific questions. I want to be able to know, why did you run for the Board of Education? Yes, I read everybody's bio. I understand what it says. But what is your why? Why are you still here? What is it the work that you get the most accomplishment from? How can I help support each and every one of you so collectively we can be a family of 8 that supports our teachers, our students, and our community as they continue to be great? When I think about strategic planning, I know for a fact that your strategic plan is up in 2023. And that has to be a primary focus for us to create a new one. And the reason why, your strategic plan is not just a document that you put on a shelf and just let it live there after you create it. Everything you do, from how you finance the district, how you bring curriculum materials in, how you operate as a Board of Education, has to be run through that strategic plan. Right now, currently in my role as Deputy Superintendent, it is my job to make sure everything aligns with the strategic plan. So whenever we have a meeting of any sort, the strategic plan is already on the table. Before we're able to purchase anything, things that we talk about that we want to be able to do differently throughout our school, our school system as it relates to curriculum, we have to write down not only our why, but how does it go strictly with our strategic plan. Our strategic plan is an opportunity for us to talk about what our shared beliefs are, what our values are, and for us to promote to the community what type of experience their child should be able to expect when they're with us on a day-to-day basis.
Given your research and what you know about our district, what would you believe are the 2 or 3 most critical long-term priorities we need to address? How would your background and skills help us address these priorities?
Great question. When I think about our long-term priorities, we have to address student achievement. I'm just going to say all 3 of them, and then I will come back if you don't mind. We have to address student achievement. We have to talk about the process and protocols that we have throughout the district. And we also talk about our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And I'm going to go through each one of those and kind of talk about why and my experience with those. When we talk about student achievement, we need to make sure that we're keeping student achievement high for all of our learners. And at the same time, we also need to talk about how can we make sure we are closing some of our achievement gaps. We want to close all of them, of course, but that is very hard work. And when we do that, we have to look to close our gaps, not by bringing our top students down in any type of way, but we have to accelerate learning so that they have an opportunity to have high expectations and connect with our curriculum and have opportunities that allow them to apply their learning. And to be able to do that, that's hard work. So that's a long-term goal for us to really determine what our students need. If our students need more AP classes or more experiences at Lawrence Tech, or they need more CTE opportunities, we need to find out exactly what we can do to help them reach their overall goals. When we talk about process and we talk about procedures, in my role now as Deputy Superintendent, I am a little bit of HR. I'm a little bit of business services. I'm a little bit of non-instructional services. I'm a little bit of finance. I kind of have my hand in a lot of different situations and pots. And process and procedure is something that I monitor throughout the district. And we need those because they also filter what your beliefs are. Trustee Noble, I believe I heard you the other night during the board meeting you want to talk about what volunteerism looks like at the policy committee. That is something that we need to talk about what it looks like across all of our schools. And part of my job as Deputy Superintendent is to make sure that those policies, not only do they share our beliefs, but they also create a system to keep our students safe. Every school should be using the same set of policies, and it is my job and my role to make sure that we're going through those and everyone knows what those policies and procedures are so we don't have enforcement situations take place. Lastly, a long-term priority is our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I'm just going to name it. I realized there was a situation, an enforced situation that took place at the high school recently. And I know we have a healing plan in place, and I'm looking to learn more about what that healing plan looks like. But we shouldn't fall back on not doing our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I've been a part of situations where things have not gone well, and we have to continue to do the work because our students deserve it. They deserve to feel safe. They deserve to be seen. They deserve to have a sense of belonging, and we need to make sure that we are working with them, hearing their voice, seeing what sense of belonging and what safety means to them. It will be easy for us as a family of 8 to say, this is what needs to be done in the high school for students to feel safe. That's the easy thing to do. We need to hear from them. That way we're able to create plans, create opportunities, create dialogue so that they can have buy-in into what their school system looks like. So when we talk about my background, I've led diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in both districts that I've been in previously. I lead our support groups around diversity and community engagement around diversity, not only inside of the school day, but also outside. I'm part of the District United, Communities United in Diversity meetings. I help lead and chair those. I told you before, I help control all of our systems, process, and protocols and procedures throughout the entire district right now. And when we talk about student achievement, I help our curriculum team monitor and look at trends, build professional development around the trends that we see around student achievement, and find ways to make joyful learning experiences, not only for our students, but for our teachers as well.
Trustee Beck-Emmer.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What is your experience with threat assessments, and what have you learned from those experiences?
Thank you for that question. I feel like this question was designed for me. And here's why. Before I accepted the role of deputy superintendent, I thought we had a robust threat assessment protocol, and we did not. So the first thing our superintendent told me that I had to be able to do was to create one. So what we did, that was a job that was way bigger than me in my role. I had to collaborate with our director of special education, with our mental health team in almost every building, with our school psychologists, with our social workers, and we had to talk about what were the best practices that we need to adhere to around our threat assessments. And when we're talking around threats, we're talking around mental health situations. We're talking around physical threats against other people and threats against yourself. Those are all 3 situations we have to consider. So when we put our team together, we were able to use research from NASSP, which is the National Association of School Psychologists, Social Workers and Psychologists. We were also able to lend on our work with our police chiefs and our fire department. We also partnered with other districts to see what they were doing around best practice, and we created this threat assessment. We created this risk assessment and this suicide assessment. And then we took that to our practitioners. We took it to our principals, and we took it to our staff to garner, how would this look in a practical format within your school? And they gave us a lot of feedback. So then we went back to the drawing board, we used the feedback that they gave to us, and then we created an even better document. And I'm happy to say we have a very robust threat assessment program now. After we had our threat assessment, we realized that we needed to have training for all the individuals that we have throughout our school system. And we did that. And we started with our principals first because they were helping lead the work. One critical protocol that we have around our threat assessment is nobody can do a threat assessment by themselves. So our principals had to be fluent in the process to be able to help our mental health teams. So we also brought in a security consultant, and they went through every building to make sure it was safe, They also did armed assailant training for our staff. That's how we kicked off our school year last year. We did 2 days of training, and they went in each and every building to make sure it was safe. They showed teachers how to be able to utilize their skills in case different situations arise. They showed them how to be able to block the door, how to keep themselves and students safe, and we were able to bring down the temperature of the threat assessment by being intentional about what the professional development will look like. After we had the professional development, unfortunately, we did have a situation inside of our school system where we thought we had an active shooter. And it was traumatic. Me being in a deputy superintendent role, I am the crisis commander, which means I'm the first person that gets a call whenever a crisis takes place. And I remember, it wasn't a call at that point in time, it was a text. Hey, we're in lockdown. The police are here. And we had to go right into our threat assessment process and protocols and work with the police. I'm happy to say, I'm very happy it was a false alarm, number one. I'm also happy to say that I'm very proud of our staff. Because of the training, because of the intentional practice that they did with the table-talk activities, at staff meetings they talked about it, teachers were well informed, everyone was safe. And they did it the proper way. And they did it differently. Part of our training was that there are 3 things you can do. You can fight, you can bar yourself in the classroom where nobody can get in, or you can flee. And luckily you didn't have to fight because it was a false alarm. But there were some classrooms who did flee to the church across the street because they thought that was best. And there were some that really bunkered down in their classrooms. So I'm really proud of how our schools and our administrators took the challenge of using that threat assessment in the moment. What have we learned from that experience, or just the threat assessment experience in general? I've learned communication is key. We have to communicate with our stakeholders, and they have to be prepared before the situation takes place. After the situation that took place at our high school, we had what's called an AAR, which means an after-action review. And we took time to go over, okay, did our walkie-talkies work? How were people on the 3rd level? Were there any speakers in our buildings that needed to be repaired? And we brought a list of things that had to be done based upon that situation. And we learned that we need to take critical inventory in our buildings and make sure our students and staff are safe and supplied with the right materials. Thank you for the question, Trustee McGarvey.
Superintendents are often faced with the challenge of making decisions when there is no clear right answer and members of the community are split on the right path forward. Talk about a time when you were faced with a difficult decision where you knew there would be a group of people unhappy with your decision no matter what you chose to do. How did you go about making that decision and getting people on board with the direction you determined was best?
Thank you for the question. I realize this is a very hypothetical situation because I know in Grosse Pointe and in Bloomfield Hills, nobody's ever unhappy with the decision that's made. So I appreciate the hypothetical question. When I think about making decisions, it starts with the why. Why is this? What is a decision and why are we making it? One decision that I'm thinking about that comes to mind for me is around the budget process. Unless you're living under a rock right now, you know within Grosse Pointe, we're going through some pretty hard times financially. And we have been charged by our Board of Education, and we were charged in February of eliminating $5 million from our budget. And that was a huge task for our cabinet team to do. And we couldn't do it by ourselves. And like every decision that you ever make, you need input. So we garnered input. We put together an advisory team of individuals across the district for us to look at not only what we were spending our money on, but how could we do things differently? How could we be innovative? How could we be creative? What were some of our priorities that we need to focus on? What were some of the traditional things we were doing that we were no longer needing to do, and we could use that funding differently? When we were in that room over the course of about 6 weeks, 1 week was a vacation break for us, but I didn't take a vacation because I was prepping for several things around the budgeting process. We came up with recommendations. When I say we, the team that we consulted with, we didn't garner recommendations from them. We just garnered feedback and input. Nobody wants to reduce or eliminate anything. That's one of the hardest things to do throughout a school district. And we've been doing that, and we have been doing that for the last couple of years, but we need to do even more this year. Every year, we always meet, me and my superintendent and our CFO, meet to go over and say, what are we going to do as far as reduction this year due to decline in enrollment? But this year, it was more. Nobody ever wants to reduce anything. But with that feedback, we had recommendations that we had to make to the Board of Education, that we wanted to make to the Board of Education because we felt like we could do some things differently. And we owned that decision. It was our decision. I had to present to the Board of Education several times. I had to present to our Finance and Facilities meeting several times. I was charged with connecting with every individual who was impacted by their budget reductions one-on-one to let them know the unfortunate nature of their position, the why behind it, and allow them to be able to ask questions about our decision. And what I can say, based upon that experience, yes, they did not like the end results, but they appreciated the integrity that I had to come and meet with them face to face to let them know about their position and how we were moving forward. Going through that process, we tried to be as humanistic as possible. We tried to make sure before anything was released to the media, anything was in a public board meeting, that we connected with those individuals right away so that they knew before the public knew. We also didn't mention anybody's name. We just mentioned positions and potential programming so that when it didn't become personal. Yes, it's personal to make budget reductions, but we didn't want it to start that way. Throughout that process, we also thought about some things that we can do innovatively. So we also made some new positions, made some new roles. We conformed some things to be able to make our system even better for the students in which we service. So back to that second part of the question, like how do you go about making a decision? It's with input. You have to have input from stakeholders. And then whenever you make that hard decision, you also have to go to the community. There were several members of our community that did not like our decision and that spoke out and petitioned the board to change things. There were some things that were changed. And I'll be the first one to say some of those changes were actually good changes. Some things maybe we missed, and with that community input, we were able to make sure that it was a collective process as much as it could be. Thank you.
Switching gears, what impact has the use of standardized testing results had on our public education system?
That's a really good question. When we think about standardized testing, I firmly believe that there's some positives from it, especially how we use it, the impact on how the use of standardized testing results have had on our system, and there are also some challenges with how it is used. Let's start with the positives first. When we think about standardized testing, it's great that we know how well our students are doing. We can use that to create a data story as a school district, and then we also can use that for our MTSS process and systems. And when we think about MTSS has 3 tiers. The first tier is educational assistance that every student gets. Then there's a second tier that is more smaller groups, and then the third is the most intensive for our students who need one-on-one support. So when we're looking at our data from standardized tests, we can use it to make sure we are stretching our highest achievers, making sure they have the AP classes that they needed, making sure that they have the outdoor learning experiences that they need, make sure they have the hands-on experiences that they need. We also can make sure that students that are in Tier 3 also have the acceleration that they need based upon the standardized tests. When we also think about standardized tests, sometimes it can be challenging because it can be the gatekeeper to opportunities for our students. And we should always be looking at how can we make sure students have access to learning environments, and how can they have multiple ways to show their learning that they are prepared for some of those AP classes. I can tell you right now at the high school, we have done a great job of looking at our support classes and making sure that we're using co-teaching opportunities. And we also have at our high school level where AP classes also have support classes that go with them or have a co-teaching model. That way we can offer the classes to more students and give them opportunities to also accelerate their learning in the AP class. So when we think about those ways we use standardized testing, we need to use it in ways that help build achievement for our students. but we also need to make sure that it's not harmful to our students. I've seen several times where students have had mental challenges around how they are looked at for their test scores. They internalize their score, and if they don't feel like their score is at a certain par, or if their brother or sister is getting a better score, they feel a certain way about themselves, and I've seen a mental health crisis around it. So we need to use it as a snapshot. We need to use it to make sure our curriculum and our educational process, of course, is being done correctly, but we shouldn't be using it also as a weapon for our teachers. We don't want to weaponize the data. We want to use it and to be able to judge growth and see what we can do across the board. Me and my role, what I do with standardized testing, I look at our trends. I create professional development for our teachers, especially our newer teachers that are coming in. A lot of our hiring process that we have as far as our new onboarding of teachers is built around our testing data so we can give them opportunities before they even come into our school system about what it means to be successful. So my role is to monitor it, to make sure that we are informing our public of what our testing scores are, and that we're building opportunities for staff to become better at their crafts. Because if our teachers are becoming better in their learning, it goes hand in hand with our students.
Trustee Hill?
Thank you. How do you think various stakeholders, such as parents, staff members, and community members, should be involved in our planning process and in setting direction for the district?
Every way possible. Every district I worked in has been an engaged community. And we need to make sure that we are not only engaging with our community, but we are creating opportunities for them to engage with us. Prime example, when we're talking about our strategic plan and we're going through and we're trying to make a new one, we need to create listening sessions. We need to create opportunities for the community to come to us and let us know what their main priorities are. And when we talk about the community, we need to talk about people who do not have children in our school system. We need to talk about those business owners. We need to talk about people who have had children that have left our school system and hear from them about what they would have liked our school system to be like when their children were here. That gives us all input into what we can do to make sure our school system is successful. So when I think about communicating with our stakeholders, any way possible, whether that's face-to-face, I am not too proud to walk door to door. I have done it before to be able to engage our stakeholders. Within Grosse Pointe, we serve 5 Grosse Points, and we also, the 5 points in Grosse Pointe, and we also serve Harper Woods. And we constantly hear the message that we need to make sure that we connect with all 6 of the communities that we service. And sometimes we have to work a little bit harder to engage families. And we have to do that by going door to door, sending emails, follow-up phone calls, conversations. We should be doing everything we can to include that input so that when we do set a direction for the district, it is one that we've had opinions on both sides and our why can be strong, and we can say that we engage the entire community throughout this process.
How do we create a district-wide culture of continuous improvement, planning strategically, and aligning our actions to achieve strategic outcomes?
When we talk about a culture of continuous improvement, I want to first talk about culture for a second. Because culture means that there are high expectations, there's a value and belief system that is established, and it has been communicated effectively. So when you're creating a culture of continuous improvement, and honestly, that's our job as learners, students and adults, to continuously improve. That's why we have 180 days of school. We need to be coming to school every day to become better and better for ourselves and for others. So how do we create it? We create it collaboratively with our staff, with our principals, and with our communities. We can't do it ourselves just at these meetings. We have to find out exactly what is working. We have to plan strategically based upon the data story that we have, based upon our achievement scores, and we have to align those items to our strategic plan. So how do we create that? We create it by having intentional conversations. We create it by building relationships with our stakeholders where we're getting authentic answers to our questions around what is happening throughout our school system. We also have to think about what is the data that our students are bringing for us, and what are the outcomes that we have. We have to plan for, if we have certain outcomes that we establish, how are we achieving those based upon our learning efforts? And then we have to have professional development as well to make sure teachers are properly trained in applying those strategic initiatives throughout the district.
Effective and timely communication is vital to the success of a school district. Please describe the type of communication students, staff, parents, and the board should expect to receive from you.
You can expect to receive from me communication that is both proactive and reactive. Unfortunately, there will be situations that will happen throughout our school system. And with me, I'm always going to be factual. You're going to hear from me first before you hear it on the news. I'm going to let you know exactly what efforts we took with the students. That way, parents are getting information before students come home to be able to talk about it. And that's important, to be able to build trust within the community that we are serving. Other forms of communication are going to be proactive. You're going to see a weekly newsletter from me and our team at Central Office to our community about what things need to be celebrated throughout our community. There are so many things that need to be celebrated. Let's talk about just our PSAT scores within 8th grade. They are extremely strong. I heard someone say they're actually some of the best in the county, which are amazing. We also need to be celebrating our 4 perfect ACT scores in the last 24 months. We should be celebrating those successes. We should also be telling our community about ways in which they can build an opportunity to connect with us or be involved in the community. And they can do that through our weekly newsletter. As a Board of Education, you're also going to get communication from me weekly that is sent just to you, so you can know exactly what my day-to-day activities are, who I'm meeting with, what some of my big rocks are, what legislators I'm connecting with, what training I'm going over, what I'm wondering about, what I'm noticing about, so that you are well informed and you know what I'm doing throughout our school system, and we can build trust in that way. I believe in a no surprise method. You should not be surprised at all by anything that is said by a community member or that is said up here at the podium at a board meeting, because I'm already going to have you informed of what we are doing as a district and how it relates to our policies and procedures. And if anything is on the horizon, you're going to know about it first. Another form of communication is that we're going to communicate weekly with our staff members. They should be knowing what professional development is available, how as a curriculum and instruction team we are supporting their efforts, what our professional learning communities look like and things that we can focus on, what are our data and trends that we're getting from our students. They have to know that as well. That way they can do their job effectively.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bishop, for being here tonight with us and spending some time going through the questions.
Thank you.
How would you ensure that our district spending is aligned with our priorities?
Great question. So when we talk about our district spending, we have to prioritize our priorities, because everything can't be a priority. And how do we do that? We have to do it through our strategic plan. We have to think about, what do our students need to continue to achieve at high levels and to accelerate learning. And we do that by looking at our beliefs, our values, and attaching that to our strategic plan. We also have to look at the data. Let's take a look at the data. What is the data saying about the interventions that we have in place? In our district right now, currently, I help support throughout the district things that we do with our ESSER funding. We have instructional coaches, we have literacy coaches, we have a multitude of extra support for our students and teachers. When we look at those instructional supports, we have to follow the data. Is it working? So when we ensure the district's spending is aligned to our priorities should be student achievement. And when we're able to do that and we're able to see the benefits of it, we are able then to plan accordingly to see exactly where our money needs to be spent and how it is being spent. I work tirelessly with our CFO, and we're constantly talking around budget natures, because I help building principles with their budget and exactly how they spend their money. And we're constantly talking about what can we do to be innovative, to be progressive, to not just fall into the status quo, but it still has to go back to the fabric of what we do, and that's our strategic plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What opportunities do you believe budget limitations present? In tough financial times, what are your top 3 priorities?
That's a great question, because as you know, I'm doing a lot with the budget right now. When we think about tough times and budget limitations, we have to think about how can we do things differently? How can we be innovative with the work that we do? How can we continue to provide opportunities for our students to continue to take certain classes? And how can we get creative with how we support students, no matter what end of the spectrum that they're on? During tough financial times, the 3 priorities we need to focus on is the safety of our students. They must continue to be safe throughout our school system. We also need to focus on maximizing student achievement and keeping programming that our students need to be successful. And last but not least, we also need to work through right-sizing our district so that we're following our enrollment trends and having just enough teachers and just enough opportunities for the students in which we have. So in my current role right now, I work with our CFO to do just this. We found creative ways to do things differently, whether that be support classes, whether that be providing tutoring opportunities, whether that be keeping students safe in their overall environment. We are still continue to have a high academic standard for our students, and we do it in very creative ways because we have to.
Thank you. Please describe your experiences with millage renewals, bond proposals, and sinking fund proposals. Were these experiences successful? Why or why not?
Great question. I believe I just told you, but I work very closely with our CFO, and you have to, because we have to be good fiduciaries. But when we think about bond proposals and sinking funds, I've definitely been a part of bond committees. And right now, we're in the 4th year of our bond proposal that we have in Grosse Pointe, where we were awarded $111 million for our schools. And a theme that we utilized for our bond work was safe, dry, and connected. And what our committee did is we researched what happened the last time we tried to do a bond. So when we tried to do a bond in the early 2000s, it failed within our community. And we went back to look at the why. And what we heard from stakeholders before we went for another bond was that we weren't clear about our why. And people didn't know exactly what they were going to be, what the money was going to be used for. So this time, we had to do exactly that. We had to focus on our why. And we did that by not only just telling our community what our why was, we actually brought them into our school system to actually see our buildings. I remember opening it up, because I was a principal at the time when we did this, opening up our building on a Saturday and Sunday to have people come through just to be able to see some of the water that was leaking from the ceiling. And they said, "What? This is happening within your school? Why didn't you tell us?" Well, we kind of did, but there's a better way in which we can tell you. So we want to build in opportunities for us to be able to share our why with our community, and we want to find ways that we can ensure how the money is being spent to be able to connect with our community. Once that bond was approved, of course, we worked with PFM, which is our financial advisors. We also worked to go out for bid for the projects that we did for our capital investments. We also worked with our community to make sure they are updated on that construction and make sure it was done in time. So we worked with Plant Moran and Plant Moran Cressler on our projections and also on our project management. And it was extremely successful. When we talk about sinking funds and we talk about millage renewals, I personally have not been a part of those conversations in my tenure in central office. What I can tell you is I know right now the Bloomfield Hills Schools actually is going to be putting on their ballot for the November 7th election that they would like to have their sinking fund renewed, and that is extremely important. And I know that we're trying to levy .7165 mills, and that would generate $3.3 million for us. That's extremely important. Based upon the foundational allowance that we get, we know that's only equates for 50% of our operating budget. We have to have operating millages and also sinking funds to be able to do what we need to do as a school system, so we're not using our money to have to do capital improvements. So it's important for us within our millage renewals and our sinking fund renewals, we stay current with those renewals so they don't lapse, because that would then take us down in the amount of funding that we would have as a school district. And we need to continue to be a hold harmless district and continue to keep our operating millage high so that we can continue to get the 18 mills that we're currently getting now. That way we can have our per student ratio be the same.
Thank you. Trustee Noble?
Thanks, Dr. Bishop, for being here today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and
Thank you.
Congratulations for getting this far.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask questions about staff and personnel.
Okay.
So how would you interact with other administrators in our district? How would you strike a balance between giving them the support and autonomy they need to lead effectively while holding them accountable as appropriate and necessary?
Thank you for the question, Trustee Noble. When I think about interaction with administrators, I will do exactly what I'm doing right now. My interactions will be positive. I'm a relationship-based leader. And what that means is that we build relationships and find ways to find out exactly what the expertise are of our administrators. What are their passions? That way, when we have to delegate certain tasks, we already know that they're going to be successful, and they'll just need a little bit of guidance to get the work done. On a day-to-day interaction, I'm going to be there meeting with principals one-on-one, not when a crisis arises, but just to be there in case they need support, just to have conversations around what they need for their buildings. That's important. It's important for us to have a relationship with our administrators, with our community, with each and every one of us before we need a relationship to rely on. And having that relationship for me gives me that opportunity to also give feedback. I firmly believe feedback is a gift. And we have to build this continuous feedback loop where we're talking about what is happening right, but also what needs to be changed. I know for a fact, as a leader, I want that. I would like each and every one of you, if I'm honored enough to be the next superintendent, if I do something and it's not up to par, or I can do it better, I will want to know. That would be a gift for me, so I can go back to the drawing board, I can find ways to be better, and then I can think about what I can do to better support each and every one of you on that stage. So when we're supporting our administrators, we're doing it proactively. We're also doing it when they're in crisis. Right now, within my role as deputy superintendent, whenever there is a crisis, I'm called, and I'm often talking to at least 7 or 8 principals a day for a multitude of different things. And it's about supporting them in their building. It's about making sure that we're making collaborative decisions together. And it's about giving them autonomy after they've had a chance to ask me questions, to go over policies and procedures, and to find out and get my advice on how they should move forward. When we talk about autonomy and we talk about delegating tasks, that's something that we have to do with the guidance, and we talk about what the task is and continue to collaborate before those big decisions are made, that we talk to one another to see if that aligns with our overall mission and vision. Holding people accountable, that's something that I have to do, and I have no problem doing that. I can remember a time when I was in a meeting with an administrator, and they were with a parent, and we were going through the meeting, and it could have been different. And I have a great relationship with this administrator. Right after I asked them to be able to stay for us to have a conversation. And I told them there are some things that we could do better. We have to be better. And one thing about me is that I praise in public, but I reprimand or I suggest certain things in private. So when we were having that conversation, she really took it to heart what I was saying and appreciated the feedback that I was giving to her. And I firmly believe she did that because we have a relationship. If I wouldn't have had a relationship with her, I don't know if the feedback would have been received the same way. And we also can stretch our administrators and stretch our teaching staff and stretch our students when we have that focus on relationships first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please describe your most successful experience with building a high-performing work team.
When we talk about a high-performing work team, I'm going to get to actually, what I feel like my most successful experience has been. But when we talk about a high-performing work team, we're talking about having a common goal. We're talking about having shared vision. We're talking about creating spaces where everyone feels safe to share their thinking, challenge one another, communicate effectively, and take into consideration what everyone's passions are, what their areas of expertise are, and what their roles are. So when you're building a team, you have to make sure you have different thinkers in the room. You have to make sure that norms are built. And whenever you build a team, you have to think about the work to build teams. And there's a psychologist that does this work, and his name is Brickman, and he talks about building teams. There's a forming stage, there's a norming stage, there's a performing stage, and there's also a storming stage. And when you're building a team, you're gonna go through all of those different phases. And then there's an adjourning phase, which when your task is done, the team will then go their own ways. For me, the most successful team experience I've had is in my current role right now. And I say that for a couple of different reasons. When I first walked into the role of deputy superintendent, the person who was in the role before me was there for 10 years. That's a long time to be with one team for 10 years. And they let me know one of my challenges and one of the things I was going to have to do was to build my own team now. And to do that, I had one-on-one conversations with everyone who was on our cabinet team. I wanted to find out what worked and what didn't work. I wanted to find out, based upon the trends that we're seeing within our student data and student achievement, what things do we need to do differently? How do you need me as a leader to be different so I can best support you and your ultimate goals? And I will say on our team now, it's phenomenal because we have space to challenge one another. We speak from our heart. We build protocols in where we're able to question everything. And we have firm norms in place that allow us to not only be productive, but to also be insightful and to be curious about each other and what we're able to bring to the table so we are able to perform at an all-time high. I'm thinking right now of my relationship that I have with our CFO and our Director of Human Resources. Because my role is a little bit of human resources, is a little bit of instruction, it's a little bit of non-instructional services, it's a little bit of business, and I have my hand in all these pots, we have to have relationships. So when we're having those hard conversations with staff members who may have made a mistake and now human resources has to come into play, we have to do that in a way where we are on the same page. And with our CFO, we're constantly having conversations around how can we as a team continue to achieve greatness through the limitations that we have throughout the budget. And that is only done when you're able to have those intentional conversations, have those relationships, have that shared focus and vision for your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What would you suggest in terms of a comprehensive professional development plan for our educators? Specifically, what would be the key priority areas as well as the delivery system?
Great question. First off, learning should be joyful. We are here for teaching and learning. So when we're creating an experience around teaching and learning, the more our teachers know, the more our students will know, and the higher the achievement will be from them. Learning should be fun. That's what we're here to do. So when we think about, I'm going to start at the end of this question, if you don't mind. I'm going to start with the key priorities. I'm actually going to start with the delivery system. I believe in face-to-face professional development. Especially coming out of COVID, yes, we did some things extremely well about being on Zoom, but having someone in front of you who you can connect with, you can see their facial expressions, you can have conversations with them, ask follow-up questions, not have to unmute yourself. Those are an opportunity for us that we need to embrace. I'm also okay with the hybrid method and also sometimes professional development being online. But when those situations do happen, we also have to have protocols in place to make sure that the PD is happening with validity that everyone is getting the same message and people are actually attending. So we need to make sure that we're upping our protocols if we're going to do things that are not face-to-face, although we still need to do those if they are face-to-face. When I think about our key priority areas, that should be determined based upon our strategic plan, based upon the data that we have of how well our students are achieving, and based upon what our teachers are saying they need to learn about. We employ our educators in the classroom, and I know we have great educators in Bloomfield Hills. We need to listen to them and find out from them exactly what they want to learn. That way we can give them the opportunities to be better. Once again, teacher professional development and opportunities to learn and their growth is directly tied to the development of our students. So how do you create a comprehensive professional development plan for educators? You do it with collaboration. Me and the teaching and learning team, we can't just do it by ourselves. We have to connect with teachers and find out what they want to learn about. We have to give them voice and choice in their learning. We have to think about the adult learning theories that require us to have conversation, talk about the why behind the PD. We have to do all those things for it to be successful. My experience with professional development, and I work with our curriculum team to design our November 7th Election Day PD every year, and that's a full day of professional development that we have for our staff. And they come, let me backtrack for a second. Before they actually come to professional development, they are given a survey of what they want to learn more about. Then they're also given a survey to say, is there anything that you're doing that's a best practice that you want to be able to share with your colleagues and your community of learners? And I'm happy to say, when we sent that survey out, especially for the last couple of years, 60% of the classes and learning opportunities that we've had within our professional learning day on November 7th have been taught by our own teachers. That's amazing that they want to fuel learning for other individuals in our school system. That's exciting. After they fill out that survey and they let us know they want to be involved, we then design a process in which people can present and also go to whatever session they would like to be able to go. And every hour on the hour, and some sessions are a little bit longer, some are half-day sessions, some sessions are an hour and a half, we send out a Google Doc where teachers can pick and choose exactly what class they want to be able to go to. After they go through the professional development, we send them a survey where they can let us know exactly what their experiences were. And then we begin the process all over again to find out what we can do better the next time. But then we also take a look at our student data. Did our student data go up with the experiences that we were able to give our teachers? And if they didn't, we need to go back to the table to make sure we're creating different learning opportunities so student achievement remains our priority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Colin?
Thank you very much for applying for superintendent. I know it's a long process, and congratulations for being here. What experiences and success have you had with closing the achievement gap for economically disadvantaged and minority students?
It's a great question. If I actually knew how to do that extremely well, I wouldn't be in front of you all today because I would be a millionaire, probably a billionaire if I knew how to close all the achievement gaps. When I think about the success, I'm gonna start with the success first. I have had a little success when it comes to closing just a minimal amount of closing the achievement gaps without having to bring our highest achievers down to do it. And we've done it through systematic ways of looking at early interventions for our earliest learners. We have literacy coaches employed throughout our school system. And we also have Title I buildings. And I know you also have a Title I building in Eastover here in Bloomfield Hills Schools. And we've done a fantastic job of screening our students, finding out what they're able to do, and then providing intervention before some of those gaps become a little bit too big. And we found out that if we can get to students early enough and give them the tools that they need in a firm foundation in their literacy skills, it helps them not only in literacy, but also in every other area. And that's been extremely successful for us. So what experience have I had with that? With me and the instructional team, we have been a part of the MyKIP process. The MyKIP process is the Michigan Continuous Improvement process. And we have been looking at our trends and our gaps across the entire district. And that is exactly how we got to focusing on literacy as an entire district. We looked at our trends. We saw across the board we could do better. So from our Young 5 programming all the way to our 12th grade, we decided to focus on literacy instruction. We focus on the essential elements at both the elementary and the secondary area. We provided professional development for our teachers to make sure that they were well-trained in how to be able to connect with their students and deliver information. We also continue to look at our data during our PLC meetings. Teachers were charged with their principals to look at data and then look at it again, look at our NWEA scores, look at our PSAT scores, look at our SAT scores, and see what we could do to continue to move students forward. And we've done a wonderful job of not only reporting to the state our progress, but also looking at the best practices that we have throughout the district so that we can continue to achieve at high levels with all of our students.
Thank you. Please give us an example of educational change or reform you have initiated in your career that has led to improvements in student learning.
Great question. When I think about educational change and reform, sometimes that is really hard to do with the structures we have in place and sometimes with funding. But we've done a couple of things that I'm really excited about in Grosse Pointe. We have used our ESSER funding to provide opportunities for our students to thrive. A couple of examples of that is that we've used our 31-0 funding to provide general education social workers for our buildings. And we did that because coming out of COVID, we saw an uptick in traumatic experiences, trauma with our students, and we saw how it was impacting and creating some of those gaps and even making them bigger. And behaviors that we were seeing from our students were at an all-time high, unfortunately. So, and then also in our district, before we actually used this funding to bring in social workers, all the social workers that we had throughout our district were only tied to students who had an IEP. An IEP, of course, as you know, is an individualized educational plan. And we wanted to provide support to students who didn't qualify for those type of services because they also needed it. So through that funding, we were able to use social workers to help support students. And I'm happy to say we're seeing that students' time in the classroom has increased. In a proactive way, we've been able to create different support groups for students. That way, the behaviors that we were seeing that were distracting the learning of themselves and others have decreased. And that has been a positive thing throughout our district. At the secondary level, we created a position at one of our high schools, and it's called the Dean of Culture and Community. And in that position, it was put in place to really help with student behavior. We saw a need, and we were able to fill that need through ESSER funding to address the behaviors that were happening throughout the school day. And I'm happy to say, based upon the data that we have from the results so far, that our incidences, especially behavior, have gone down. But a true statistic that we're really proud of is that the instances of fighting within one of our schools have gone down by 80%. 80% by interventions that we've put in place. And I'm just happy that we were able to make that happen, and I'm happy for our community, and I'm happy for, our high school that we were able to make that impact of 80% reduction in occurrences of fights.
Thank you. What is the biggest risk you have taken to do what's right for children?
As a leader, as a learned leader, you have to take a lot of risk. You have to be willing to do that and put students first. I can think of a couple examples, but there's one that's really near and dear to my heart. One risk that I took at the building level, and let me start off first why it was a risk. Within Grosse Pointe, some of our stakeholders and some of our individuals have a very traditional mindset. And there's nothing wrong with tradition. Tradition is great. But we have to make sure that we are evolving to be able to help support our students in giving them what they need. So this risk that I'm getting ready to tell you about was a risk of actually changing tradition. And yes, I'm going to tell you right now, there was some uproar around it, and I'll talk about that in a second. At the building level, we used to have this daddy-daughter dance, and I loved it. I would take my daughters to it. I have 2 daughters, so I used to, take them. They used to wear their tutus. And I didn't wear a tutu. I wore a suit and a tie, just for clarity. And we had a wonderful time. We danced to Taylor Swift. We did the cha-cha slide. We did all those things. But maybe it was for my second year in the building. Students started to come up to me and they said, Dr. Bishop, I'm sorry, I was Mr. Bishop at that time. They said, Mr. Bishop, I'm not able to go to this dance. And I said, why? And they said, and it should have been obvious to me, but they said, I don't have a dad. And a lot of our students said that to me, and that really hit hard for me. And then they would come back to be able to say, well, why can't you go with me? Can you be my dad at this event? And then after we would have the dance, we would have students that would be sad because we would talk about how much fun we had at this dance. We would have pictures all over our website, and it would be something that we talked about, and they weren't able to partake in that experience. And to me, that was cutting down on students having a true sense of belonging. So what did I do? I went to our PTO, and I said, I want you to hear me out. I realize this is going to be a risk, and I realize we're going to get some pushback. But I want you to think about how we can do this dance differently, and we can be more inclusive of all of our populations. And I remember one PTO meeting. It lasted about 4 or 5 hours, and we had people who came up just to be able to share their perspective on both sides of it. And we were able to make that change. So the following year, and of course we listened to the feedback, we spoke our why, we stayed firm within our decision. And that next year when we had our special person dance, it was amazing. It was amazing in the fact that we had more student attendance than we ever had in any one of our functions. We had so much attention, we sent out RSVPs, we can no longer have it in our gym. We had to take it from our gym to the middle school where they had 3 gyms so that we could have different things in different rooms just to be able to spread people out. It was an opportunity that we had to take for our students because it was the right opportunity, and it helped create a sense of belonging. And I would do it again if I had to.
Siva?
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, Dr. Bishop.
Good
Thank you
evening.
for being here today. I'm going to touch on leadership attributes.
Okay.
So please describe your typical style of leading and talk about situations in which you may vary from that style.
Thank you so much, Vice President Kumar, for that question. I appreciate it. When I think about my typical style of leading, I'm an inspirational leader. I lead through building relationships. I lead through empowering others. I lead through coaching individuals. I lead through guiding individuals to make the best education decisions possible. And I do that on a day-to-day basis. Like I've already told you, as Deputy Superintendent, many principals will call me, and we will work through situations. I will get to the root cause of what they're going through, and I will inspire them to be able to make the right decision for their population of students. So I lead through my relationships, and it allows me to hold people accountable, and I leverage those relationships to make sure student achievement remains high and we can have the hard conversations. When I think about situations where that style may vary, I know I also have a very pragmatic and a process-driven side to me as well. And I'll give you a prime example of that, Vice President Kumar. I can remember when we were getting ready to do armed assailant training for our entire staff at the beginning of last school year. We had our security consultant come in to do the training for us. And they did their presentations about 2 hours long. And to be honest, I was not pleased. And I had to let them know that right then and there. And the reason why I had to let them know that is because we can't afford to put something in front of our staff that would have hurt or harmed them, and it needed to be better. I couldn't use my inspirational leadership qualities at that time. I had to use my pragmatic and my process-driven protocols to be able to give them due process, to ask them to go back to the drawing board, to be able to do it again and bring it again back to us. And that's exactly what they did. They brought it back to us again, and they did the presentation for us again. We still were not happy with how the presentation was getting ready to be rolled out. So we explained more of the why about what we want the presentation to be about, what we want our teachers to feel when they were done with the professional development, and what we wanted to be able to achieve through it. We talked about maybe even potentially having a different consultant from the same consultant firm to be able to come, because it was just that important to us. So they went back to the drawing board and they came back again. And this time, the professional development was much better. It was something that led to our teachers being equipped in any situation that they would encounter. And I have to say, it was very successful. But I had to take a different style of leadership that was more direct, that they understood exactly what we needed, so that we didn't have a situation on our hands where we were harming the individuals that were involved.
Thank you. What are the key elements needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship between you and the board?
That's a great question. So when I think about our family of 8, our team of 8, we have to have a great communication. We have to communicate with one another to ensure that it's not only reactive, but it's also proactive. And we do that through building relationships. I already talked about, I'm going to build a relationship with each and every one of you. I'm also, whenever I get a question from one of you, I'm going to make sure the entire board is given that same information, because I don't ever want to be seen as showing favoritism to one person. And I feel like we all need to have the same information and the same vernacular when we're going into the community, talking about our shared mission and vision. But when we talk about effective communication, that comes with consistency, and that comes with transparency. And that leads to mutual trust. So that's my second one, effective communication and mutual trust. We have to have mutual trust in each other. Your job as a board of education is governance. It's to hire the superintendent. It's to set goals for the superintendent. It's to establish our policies for our school system. And then you're trusting me as the lead learner in the school district to employ those throughout all of our schools with consistency, with process, with fidelity, and with student achievement and safety in mind. And we need mutual trust to be able to do that. I'm going to make mistakes. And when I do, I want you to let me know how I could have done better, been better for you. My job is to make your job easier. And I can do that when we have a mutual trust, and you allow me to be able to work with the professionals, uplift their voice, bring it to you. And I know for a fact, if I'm honored enough to be able to have this position, that I am working at the will of the board. I know that, and I'm proud to do that work. But I do ask, when we're having those hard conversations, that you allow me to say yes and. Yes, I can do that for you. And can you consider this? This may be our intent, but it may have this type of impact. And that's what we need to talk about. And we need to have conversations that sometimes can be spirited. And that's great, but we don't need to have them at the board table. Because we need to make sure, as a community of 8, as a team of 8, that we're leading through example, that we are charging our teachers and our students with our district mission and vision, and we're doing everything that we can to build in a true sense of belonging for all of our students.
Thank you. Last question.
Last question already?
Yes.
Okay.
How do you inspire and engage the entire school community in support of the district's vision and mission?
It's a great question to end with. When we talk about inspiring and engaging our community, we need to make sure we know exactly what those words mean. When we inspire individuals, that means we have to know them. You can't inspire me if you don't know me. So inspiration is hand in hand with relationships. We have to form relationships with all of our stakeholders, have opportunities for them to talk to us, and find out exactly what it looks like for them to be engaged. In Grosse Pointe, we've surveyed our community to find out exactly how they want us to engage with them. Is it via email? Is it via phone? Is it via text message? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? Is it going to your local gym to talk to you? We will find any way we can to be able to engage with the community. And then once we know how we can engage with them, we do have to inspire them, but it's about knowing them first. It's about them knowing our why and us knowing their why. It's about us bringing consensus when we have people who are on different sides of the aisle. It's about looking at what we have in common, valuing our differences and our beliefs, and finding ways to keep our students first. We must keep our students first in everything that we do. So when we go through and we inspire the community and we engage them, and we have a great opportunity, by the way, to do this with our new strategic plan. We can do this in a way where everyone is able to build in the experience of what every student will experience when they come into the doors of a Bloomfield Hills school.
Thank you.
We'd like to take a few minutes now to provide you an opportunity to ask questions that you may have of the Board of Education.
Thank you very much. I have 2 questions. I hope I have time for those. With reconfiguration, what are your top 2 priorities that need to be accomplished immediately?
Guess I'll answer it. Number 1 is to make sure that all of our staff and students, through the reconfiguration and this change management, have all of their questions and concerns addressed, because there's going to be high anxiety in our community. This is again, I've said this the last couple of nights, this is the biggest change management going on in our district, probably all time. So we need to make sure we have appropriate leadership to address those concerns quickly, to make sure we have a smooth opening.
Thank you.
I mean, the second one, I mean, and probably within that, you know, it covers a lot of areas. I mean, 2 things again, staff, students, and community. There's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of high anxiety of everything that's going on. We're going from 3 middle schools to 2. We're going back to a configuration of all our elementary schools, K through 5. So right now, just making sure that the smooth transition for all of our staff and all of our students happen. I think within that, there's going to be a myriad of concerns that people are going to have within the next couple of weeks, and our new superintendent's going to be chased with a lot of quick decisions to be nimble and to make those, again, hard decisions that we need to do so we have the smooth opening.
Thank you for sharing that. Trustee Collins.
I think it's also going to be very important that we use our effective communication methods with our community to ensure that we are providing accurate and clear information, not just to our stakeholders, but also to our Board of Education, that we are kept in the loop at every step of the way. I think that it's going to be very important that if any measures are changed, anything is altered, that we are definitely not showing up to a space in the unknown space as parents and community members are having conversations with us. We need to also know, as things are changing on a consistent basis, that we are also kept in a loop for any changes.
Thank you for sharing. Trustee Supt, thank you for sharing.
I think that requires being observant of emotional safety and physical safety of our teachers, parents, community members. I think with all the change, it's going to be different for everyone, but you're not going to be able, so I think it's imploring everyone to be observant, of our students. How are they doing in this transition? Of our teachers, how are they doing? Because like you said earlier, if they're not well, then our students aren't learning. So just to get the message out, to be observant for those things, at least in those like transition months, the first few months of school.
Thank you, Trustee Van German. I can go on my next question.
Yeah, sorry.
Next question I have is, what supports do you feel teachers, staff, and students will need at the beginning of the school year during the transition of a new superintendent?
All of them. I mean, I think we can try as best we can. I think we've already done that. The administration has done a great job. The building administrators have done a great job of trying to plan and proactively think about what is going to be needed. But the reality is that no matter how much planning goes into that, we're not going to have enough, right? So I think then the next most important thing is how are we going to be reactive? And to John's point, it's being observant. It's listening. It's being very, very, very visible. I think as much as we can, being in those buildings and having administration being present, not being stuck in an office anywhere, talking to kids, talking to parents, talking to community members without parents that walk around those neighborhoods and might see something that has changed that we didn't even think about, whether it's crosswalks or things like that, things that are going to get missed, and it's no one's fault. It's just everybody's responsibility to make sure that we know when something is missed. So I think having that attention to detail, that's the biggest support, is people being engaged and being visible.
I think on that, I think it's what's going to be important, and we as a board have seen several questions that have come in from staff, community members regarding the new configuration. I think effective communication, when questions come in, the people on the other end may not like the answer, but they need the answer. They need why. They don't need an answer that is unclear, that creates more questions. They need to know this is the way it's going to be, this is why it's going to be, and that'll alleviate their anxiety, as opposed to what we see sometimes. Questions come in and they may not always be addressed to the satisfactory.
I think one of the points you made was that you are, I think you said a co-collaborator or co-creator. One of the things I think is going to be important is that I can provide you what I believe that the staff and the teachers may need at that point in time. But I think it's going to be important for you to engage and survey them to see what they need. I can write a laundry list, but is that what they truly need? So I think it's going to be very important that you start that relationship and engaging with them and their spaces to see what's necessary in those classrooms that we've missed, to the points that were made before, so they can engage with you to inform you as to what's necessary in those spaces.
It's going to be very important for administrators and leadership to be able to pivot and be nimble as issues crop up. Because as Trustee Fellows said, the administration won't have answers for every issue that crops up. So may need to change direction where required, and administration's got to be on their feet and be able to do it quickly.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'll just add, everyone makes really great points, but I'll just add that, it's all about relationships, like you were saying earlier, and being out there in the community is really important. Building that trust before any issues arise. Hopefully none will, but you never can prepare. And when you prepare the most, that's when things happen. So, I think just being in the community and being out there shaking hands and getting to know parents and students, and also all the staff in Bloomfield Hills, we have wonderful staff and they affect our students. So being the face and being available is so important, I think, during this huge transition period.
Anything else?
No, those are all my questions. I'm sorry.
Well, you have a little under 9 minutes remaining. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, I just want to thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to come to you tonight to be able to share my passions, my beliefs, my values with you today. My successful experiences that I've had leading in like districts prepare me to be able to be the lead learner here. Initiatives, committees, meetings in general don't create success. We're in a people-driven environment, and we need people who are focusing on relationships, being effective communicators, and building productive teams. That is something that I specialize in. As a lead learner, you can expect from me that I will collaborate, that I will listen, I will continue to be a learner, and I will do the best that I can to make sure you as a Board of Education are informed and we have productivity from where we sit. Leadership matters. And as you said, Trustee Coleman, going through reconfiguration is going to be tough. I am comfortable making hard decisions and effectively communicating those and talking clearly about the why. And I just don't want to be the lead learner or just a superintendent. I'm not looking for just a job. I'm looking to be the superintendent here at Bloomfield Hill School. My background, my experiences, my firm foundation in building relationships, holding people accountable, and making sure that we're collaborating with our staff and community to keep student achievement high is what I feel like I can bring to continue to enhance the overall experience that students will get from Bloomfield Hill Schools. So I just want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I have to thank my beautiful wife, who's also in the back. She came with me tonight for emotional support. Without her, I know this is a 24-hour job. Without her, I wouldn't be able to do this position. But I also just want you to know, if I am chosen as the next superintendent for Bloomfield Hill Schools, you won't have anybody else who will work harder for you to make sure we keep students at the forefront of everything that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Dr. Bishop, we appreciate your interest in the superintendent position for Bloomfield Hill Schools. The board is interviewing 5 candidates this week. We'll let you know Thursday night where you stand in our search process. Thank you for your participation in our first round interviews.
Thank you for having me. Can I come around and pass out my 90-day plan off as well as
Yes.
shake your hand? Is that okay?
Thank you, thank you.
I'm gonna take my water with me.
Oh. Moving on to agenda item number 4, superintendent search next steps. The Board of Education would hold a special meeting on Thursday, July 20th at 6:00 p.m. at the Booth Center to determine which candidates will be invited to participate in the second round interviews. Finalist interviews are scheduled for Tuesday, July 25th and Wednesday, July 26th. Both will start at 6 p.m. Moving on to item number 5, public comment. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we're moving on to agenda item number 6, which is adjournment.
We discuss tomorrow.
Okay, welcome back. We will reconvene in a discussion going back to our next steps. Turn it over to John Saveri.
Thanks. Just to start with the important to touch base on what this will look like tomorrow night when we come back together and you're faced with making a decision regarding finalists. So I want you to kind of think back to how we framed it when you selected the candidates to interview from the field of applicants. It comes down again to who do you believe may possess the attributes necessary to become your next superintendent of the folks that you've met? You know more about them now than you did before. You don't have to be certain about any of them yet. If there's any certainty that comes into play, perhaps it's just on the other end. There may be folks that you're certain at this point are not equipped to be your next superintendent. But anybody who you feel like, if there's a possibility, if we learn more about this person, perhaps they could be. I could be convinced that they are. You would want to invite those folks back to continue in the process. So you're not making an absolute decision. This is who we want to be our next superintendent, but might this person or these individuals convince us still as they advance in the process that they really are the right person to lead this district going forward? So you'll want to come in tomorrow prepared to share that individually. And you can reflect back on the paperwork that you were presented with initially, the additional paperwork you've gotten, your own interview notes, the feedback that you've gotten from community members. Take a look at all of that and be prepared to say, here are the individuals I would like to advance. If there's a magic number, I would say the ideal number of finalists is 2, but you can't set an arbitrary number for this, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not telling you have to select 2. There is no absolute number to select. Honestly, if you were to come back tomorrow and say, I believe that we need to reopen the search and continue to look for that next leader. If there's nobody that you wanted to advance, that's what you would say. If there was only one individual, you would share that. You're going to do that each individually. As before, I want to remind you that we're going to focus on affirmatively why you want to advance somebody in the process. We're not going to go down the path of saying, here's why we would not like to advance somebody. We don't want to embarrass anybody publicly by being publicly critical of them, but you certainly can, to whatever extent you're comfortable. You can just say simply, if there's 2, here are the 2 individuals I'd like to advance, and leave it at that. By sharing some of your why, you're going to perhaps help your colleagues with the decision that you're about to make, others viewing as well. So you're welcome to go down that path too, but just to keep it in that positive frame and to refrain from commenting at all about folks that you would not like to advance in the process. So as I did before, I'll just kind of tally your responses. I'll give that back to you and say, here's how many landed on this candidate, and where there is consensus to advance candidates further in the process, you could make a motion, take a vote, and at that point, we would talk about next steps even beyond, kind of getting into that second round. So what questions do you have about that?
Do we have a certain amount of time to speak about the candidates, or what we think are the pros, or we just give the name of the candidates themselves?
Totally your call. I don't want to pressure anybody to say you have to speak to your rationale. You're welcome to. I think it's advisable to. I think it's beneficial to your board colleagues and others. But if where your comfort level is you're more comfortable simply saying, here are the names of those individuals, you're welcome to do that also.
We do have a space where if for instance, if one person or 2 people aren't able to attend and they'd like to still share their opinion as to who they'd recommend to move forward, could we have a process that would allow them to at least be able to share that information and content with you? Or how would you like is there a process for us to be able to have that kind of discussion for recommendations from folks who may not be able to physically be present to express those desires?
Well, I've not encountered that before, I'll be honest with you, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. So I would think the 2 options would be whatever you're most comfortable with. Anybody who wasn't able to be present, they're not going to be able to cast a vote, obviously, but if they just want their preferences known to others, they could share that with me, but it might be even more appropriate simply to share that with you and to have you then share that out in the meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
My question is about the feedback coming in. And, we try to be as transparent as possible on this board. With the exception of that feedback, the names being associated with the feedback, is it appropriate for us to share that feedback with everyone? And then any other feedback that comes in outside of that.
You're talking about the feedback from the QR code?
The feedback from the QR code, and then the feedback, and I don't know what it says when, or any feedback.
Well, if the feedback from the QR code and the emails, at least the few that we received, have gone to the entire board. What do
Right.
you mean sharing it?
I'm talking about sharing the
So
feedback.
in theory, if you want to share sentiments of, we received emails or comments in the QR code repository that said this,
I'm not saying
my
necessarily
personal
saying it.
preference would be just, I've seen themes of this from
Right.
people, I wouldn't name anyone by name.
Right.
Especially
And-
emails.
And I'm not saying that during the meeting tomorrow, we would share that feedback. I'm saying by, I don't know how you do it, but to keep it anonymous, because sometimes there's,
I think you can share it but publicly at the meeting, just convey what was shared, but I know we've received emails, people have asked to stay anonymous, and obviously the QR code is
Right.
anonymous. I would state to anybody in the public who's watching this that reminder that QR code exists, because we have not had a lot of feedback.
Right, that's
In
true.
that portal, which is, if you have things to say and you want to have an opinion and a voice in this, please don't assume that everyone else is speaking on your behalf. Please use it.
We are reading it.
we are reading it.
Trust us.
Well, and I think that's it. I would go back to what I said before in relation to, and I'm focusing again on what you're going to say tomorrow in the meeting, right? So if part of your rationale for advancing a candidate is to share some of the positive feedback that you've received, even from those responding via the QR code, I mean, by all means, I think that's absolutely appropriate. The one thing we don't want to do, again, is go down the path of being critical of candidates. It's difficult enough these days, honestly, to attract quality candidates to positions. Imagine if the fear needed to be that if I put my neck out there and take the risk of applying and interviewing, that I may be subject to the board making publicly critical comments of me that could hurt my chances elsewhere, right?
Agreed.
So we never want to go down that path, and really it's unnecessary by you excluding some candidates from your finalists. You'll be speaking loudly and clearly just by virtue of that, right? So really nothing more needs to be said beyond that anyway.
So what if it comes down to, for instance, Michelle Southward's name on the list, and that person's name, it has, 3, 4 folks, but there is a strong consideration from what public comments may have been, or someone else feels very strongly about that person maybe not advancing? How do we engage in that conversation?
Help me a little bit with that.
So if
Explain it a bit more.
Dr. Southward became one of the persons that had 4 considered,
Gotcha.
but there's a trustee that strongly is opposed to that person, how do we engage in that conversation?
I don't think you do in public. I don't think what you want to do is then get into a debate and to say, well, I disagree, and again, you're going to speak with your vote. What it comes down to is what a majority of the board determines to do at every step of the way, right? At this step, when you're advancing finalists, the same thing's going to apply when ultimately you're selecting who your next superintendent is going to be. So your objection to a candidate is going to come with a no vote. But what you still don't want to do is argue publicly and demean a candidate in order to make a point that I personally don't want to advance this person. That's all well and good. Then your vote's going to be no, presumably, right?
Right, so you're just voting yes anyway, so that
So-
it's only a
Right.
yes vote.
So what
Okay.
I'm hearing is we can, as we're moving forward candidates, indicate the why there,
Yes,
and then obviously everything else remains silent.
yes.
I disagree.
That's what I'm hearing. I'm not
Yeah,
saying-
so that's what I appreciate the sentiment, and I agree that it is hard for people to put their name in their hat. And I think we can all, as publicly elected officials, use our discretion in terms of what type of decorum we want to use in our own way about how we speak about people who have taken that risk. But this is exactly what this exercise is exactly what they've elected us to do. And they want to see and hear reasons and rationale about why we're working together as a board. And if someone is proposing someone advance and someone has a reason not to, it's well within our right and I think our duty to express that publicly. Like I said, I think that we can use our discretion in terms of being professional and courteous towards people who have taken the time to come through this very stressful and full of pressure process. But this notion of trying to stay silent and not say anything, and I'm not saying I have anything negative that I want to say. To me, I want to come in and say whether we want to advance anyone and put names forward, if I do, that I want to advance. But I'm just trying to caution against this encouragement of not stating opinions publicly.
Well, I realistically, I can't tell you that you can't.
Right.
Right? I can't force your hand. You're public officials, and my job is to advise and provide counsel and guidance. That's what I'm doing. That's based on my experience. That's based on what I think is the right thing to do. I've had an experience where a board violated that, and it really created a sticky situation with the candidate then who felt like they had been publicly diminished and wanted to push back, and it was not a pretty situation. And it's not the main reason that I would advise against it. I just think it comes down to, again, I don't think it's necessary. I think in a process like this, we want to focus on affirmatively what makes this candidate attractive to us, what makes us believe this candidate could be a good fit for this position, what makes us think this candidate could be successful in this role. And for those that don't fit that bill, nothing more really needs to be said. We simply don't advance them in the process, either at this stage or beyond.
Are we, so getting to that point, and again, I'm sure we're all going to be professionally courteous, but are we going to use names or are we going to use numbers?
Names.
Names?
The only place we used numbers or letter designations was while the candidates still had the expectation of confidentiality. But once you selected candidates to interview, that was gone.
I mean, getting a superintendent or someone, a potential superintendent to apply is hard enough. I don't want to ruin anyone's professional reputations by what we say here as a board. So I personally don't agree that we should say anything negative. We should say something to the affirmative and just leave it at that. I mean,
But it is hard because we can't go and we can't like talk, deliberate behind closed doors, right?
Nope.
So
Right.
if, let's say we have two, let's say, I'm not putting it down like this, but if it was hypothetically down to two people and it was neck and neck, but there were detractors for one candidate that weren't present in the other, the issue then is we couldn't state if, we went by what you're suggesting, we couldn't really talk about the detractors, right? Which then would, how do you deliberate as a group of 7 in an open public setting if you're not talking about the full reasons for why you're selecting someone? So I think that is a difficulty. I mean, I understand what Trustee Hill is saying. I get what you're saying. It's just difficult.
I think you can say one person's better than the other at that particular behavior or attribute, right? Or you feel this person would do a better job, and here's why. And I think,
I understand what you're saying. I know that it can be difficult. I'm simply advising that what I believe is the appropriate way to advance from this point forward.
And I don't think anyone here, I don't think we've really, right, we need to reflect and think about it overnight. But I think the point is that without being disparaging to any candidate, I think we can all reflect, before, we end up tallying our votes, reflect on, there are ways you can go about it, whether this candidate may not be a right fit because of this, without disparaging. I think that's part of the process for us to have dialogue and get everyone's perspective. And then once you get the perspective, it may change your perspective in terms of what you've seen the last couple of nights.
So what's going to happen next time we're together is you're going to go and you're going to say, Trustee Noble, who would you like to put forward? She'll say, Michelle Southward, Sivakumar.
Yes.
And then you go to Paul
Yep.
and then you'll tally, and then you'll say, Michelle Southward and Sivakumar are the ones that have 4. Is there any conversation? Is that what I'm hearing?
Isn't this our meeting? Aren't we the ones the ones making the motion and initiating the conversation?
Correct.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out the role.
My role.
Right.
Well, it can be as involved or as little involved as you want. If what you're suggesting, if President Southward's
Well,
the
we
one
make
who
the motion, but I mean, the tallying of the vote portion, are we doing that the exact same way we did for the first? I would imagine, and then anything
Yes.
else beyond that would be a conversation and
Yeah.
a motion from the
Until it
board.
votes.
I want to be helpful to you folks. If
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
prefer
Yeah, I think that works.
that I'm kind of a silent partner in this at that point, and you're kind of leading that discussion and tallying, I mean, I'm fine
So I think
with
the final part of that is if John Van Gemert has 3 votes, do we then maybe have a conversation like we thought
Sure.
about having back there?
that. Just as we did before, where if somebody wants to kind of lobby to expand the motion, right,
So-
and convince colleagues to include someone else, yes.
So just reflecting, right, going back, the history, went through this a couple years ago. So one of the things we can consider, as opposed to putting Carolyn on the spot or in this direction, I'm not saying we're going to go in this direction, is we have 7 pieces of paper and we pick 1 through 7 in terms of order.
That's a good idea.
That's what we did a couple years ago, because, again, it's not
It's a
saying
lot of
it's a lot of
pressure.
pressure, but, I don't necessarily would like to go first, or.
I was going to pick you, so.
Of course you would. But no, I'm just saying that, just,
No,
that
no, I like
takes,
that.
that takes it out of
That's
it.
That's fair.
Well, and ultimately, you're going to make that decision. We advise the procedure that I explained to you just from experience, only because it's a pretty transparent process, right? You're being very transparent in terms of your thinking, who you're supporting. If you folks come in tomorrow and want to kind of take a different approach, such as what Trustee Colin just expressed, I mean, that's ultimately your call. So you tell me.
Because what we can do is go around, you'll have the tally.
Yeah.
Someone can make a motion based on your tally on the floor, and then we could have discussion, then similar to last time, and then we could amend the motion.
Yes.
If we want to, we could vote on the motion. So it's not, if we go around and Michelle and Siva get 4 votes each, and that's the only 2 that get 4 votes, we're gonna have discussion on that.
Yes,
And then
you
from
can.
discussion, Siva, you can make a motion, either take both off the table, add someone on, whatever it would be, and then we vote on it, until we vote on that.
So how does the conversation go if no one gets four?
If no one gets 4 votes, if we go around, we could have, again, we could discuss, but in theory, if no one gets 4 votes, then
Then
we're
we're
going back to the
drawing board.
pool.
Right.
Just want to make sure. we
Now,
get
that's
that
not to
talk.
say, again, just like if,
Yeah.
let's say
I
you
mean-
select 2 candidates have, or 4 of you weigh in favor of 2 of the candidates, right? That's where the motion lands, and you can, at that point, if there's another candidate you want to convince your fellow board members perhaps should be added, you can have that discussion. There could be a vote on whether or not you want to amend the motion, see if that's successful or not, but the same thing would apply if nobody gets 4 votes. Let's say that there's 1 or 2 of the candidates where, not really votes, but 3 of you have expressed the desire to advance those candidates. Gets a little bit tricky because the motion at that point may well need to be that you were not going to advance any of the candidates at that point and want to discuss options for where you go forward from there, and that's what we would do. But like with any other motion, then you could have further discussion, and you could still have that dialogue. Well, 1 or 2 of these candidates had 3 people express a preference. Do we want to talk about perhaps amending the motion, changing the motion, and advancing the candidate? Here's why I think we should. You can have that discussion, but ultimately, any decision you make is going to come down to how you vote, right?
Yeah.
The discussion leads to a vote. The vote determines where you go.
So, to Michelle's original point, if, let's say, 1 or 2 candidates, let's just say 1 candidate gets 4, then when we have discussion, we'll, can have discussion, and to Trustee Hill's point, we can amend the motion to go to none. I'm just saying, we can go down. Just because the person got 4 votes doesn't necessarily mean, after discussion, John can amend it and saying, after further discussion, I amend it, that no one moves forward.
No, I don't think that's technically what has to happen.
No, I'm not saying it has to happen, but we
But
could do it.
it's, they either advance by a vote of 4 or not.
More often than
And if they don't,
not.
then we're moving on
But-
to find a new
Yeah,
pool.
but I'm saying a discussion can amend a vote of moving on, where someone reflected and maybe, okay.
I see what you're saying.
Be one or the other.
More often than not, and I'll just put this out there, if there's a change in the motion, it's to add, not to
Yeah.
remove anybody. So it's to say, boy, maybe we really should include this person too. Here's why I think we should. Could we entertain a motion to amend the original motion? And again, either that passes or it doesn't.
So to Paul's point, what if there is only one candidate that rises to a 4 position? We still move to a round 2 interview process?
That would be the motion, that you would advance the one candidate in the process. And then again, wherever this lands tomorrow, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 0, whatever the amount is, the next thing tomorrow night is then we're going to talk about where we go from there, what the next steps are in the process and what we do.
So if it is
Okay.
one, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is a superintendent. That means that person has
Absolutely.
advanced.
But it's
Just wanted
important that
to
you pointed that out,
point it
Michelle,
out.
because your point, remember, they're not voting that that be the superintendent.
Correct.
No.
They're voting that they advance to a second interview.
Exactly.
Yeah, because
Well,
we still need the community to have, like, they're gonna have an opportunity, the students will have an opportunity, staff will have an opportunity,
Yes.
and we'll have an opportunity. So this is just, like, to your point, you said, we have enough, we're not saying 100% this is the person.
No.
We have enough belief in their abilities to potentially be in that role. That's all it is.
Whatever the number is, add 1 in terms of determining how many choices you have, right? So if you pick one person to advance, when you ultimately vote,
Yeah.
you've got 2 choices. One is we're selecting this person to be our next superintendent, or we have not yet found the right person and we need to continue the search. If you have 2 finalists, you've got 3 choices in the end, right? Sure. But it's an important point to make publicly. You're
Yes.
absolutely right. If you're picking one candidate tomorrow, that person does not get this job by default. They're advancing in the process, and they may be the only one,
Yes.
but the process is not over, and you have not selected your next superintendent yet.
Just want to make sure we're all on the same
Yes.
page.
No, that's a good point.
Yes.
Can we briefly go through again with the second, I know there's visits that the candidates have during the course of the day, visiting facilities, meeting with the student community.
We'll
You
talk
know, community-
more about that tomorrow, but briefly, the candidates would come in the morning on the day that they're interviewing with you. They'll start with a district tour. We'll go around, see the facilities, look at the construction, get a sense of what's going on. Come back here, have lunch with some central administrators, have a chance to interact with them. We've got 3 stakeholder question and answer sessions set up, one with parents and community members together, one with students, one with administrators. I'll be present I'm not going to be present for the earlier part of this. I will be present for those question and answer sessions. I'll facilitate those discussions. We'll be pressing the people there to provide additional feedback to you. We'll provide, again, QR code, and what I impress upon them is that their engagement in that activity, they may enjoy it, it may be beneficial to them, but it really doesn't help you with your decision unless they provide feedback. So I'm really going to stress the importance of them walking away from that experience, providing you additional feedback that you can consider based on that experience. The candidate then takes a break to get some nourishment and just kind of clear their head. And at 6 o'clock, they'll come back together with you to do a brief presentation and then to go into a second round of questions. That's something else we'll talk about tomorrow. If you tell me tomorrow night we don't want to do the presentation, we won't. But the way we typically structure this is the candidate starts with a brief presentation on a topic that you choose, and we'll talk about that. And then you go into fewer questions than you ask in the first round, where you ask 21. This time it's more in the ballpark of 14. So all told, it would take about 80 minutes. We tell the candidates, we time it for 80. We don't time the parts of it individually, but we tell the candidates, you probably want to take about 20 minutes for the presentation and leave yourself about 60 for the interview.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
And we'll talk through all the questions and all that other,
We'll get into all the
Tomorrow.
nitty-gritty
Just wanna make
right
sure.
after you make your decision tomorrow evening. Yes.
all hearts and minds satisfied? Any other information?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we adjourn.
Thank you.